Good morning and welcome to the Vin Armani Show. It's Monday morning, 10 a.m., and we are here in fabulous Las Vegas, coming to you worldwide. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/VinArmani. Also on Twitter and Periscope at Vin Armani. And of course, we are live streaming on the Facebook feed of our content partner, who's curated all of our news for us and has been a wonderful help and who we could not have done this without. That's Activist Post. You can stream us on Facebook at facebook.com/Activist Post. I want to say a huge thank you. We've been at this for a couple months now. The show is going great. Christian and I, and let me go ahead and introduce, before I mention him, my co-host and producer, Mr. Christian Reyes.
Thank you, sir.
So, Christian, I think we're about 2 months in at this point. It's been a wild 2 months for news.
Yeah, it has.
In general. I mean, our timing couldn't have been better, and we couldn't have had a better partner in this whole thing with Activist Post.
They've been amazing.
They've been amazing. They started us, we hit the ground running working with them. But not only that, I mean, just the ability to have real professionals curating news for us, being sure to keep us informed. We've broken a few stories, actually. Obama's vaccine signing. I think we've done a great job of covering fake news and the Russian propaganda, which we have a lot more of that today. We also have some news, some more news in the world of automation. This thing is moving super fast,
really
right?
fast.
So we're going to stay on top of that. And a great interview today. Our guest is Jeff Berwick of the Dollar Vigilante, of Anarchast, and also of Anarchapulco. And we will talk more about that, all of those things with him. I'm very excited for that interview. But today is December 19th.
Very interesting day.
A very interesting day. Today is actually, in the United States, the real election day.
Yep.
Right? We have to have an election to elect the electors. And today, 538 Americans from various states, spread across all 50 states, are going to be meeting in their state capitals and placing their votes for either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, or perhaps somebody else, right? Because that has been the whole, well, we'll go into that. For those people who are still a little bit confused about what the Electoral College is, we've got a special guest who is going to tell you all about the Electoral College. So why don't we go ahead and bring him on, Christian?
Electoral College, the Electoral College is a vestige. It's a carryover from an earlier vision of how our federal government was going to work that put a lot of premium on states. And it used to be that the Senate was not elected directly. It was through state legislatures. And it's the same type of thinking that gives Wyoming 2 senators and with about 500,000 people, and California with 33 million get the same 2. So there are some structures in our political system, as envisioned by the founders, that sometimes are going to disadvantage Democrats. But the truth of the matter is that if we have a strong message, if we're speaking to what the American people care about, typically, the popular vote and the Electoral College vote will align.
Thanks, Obama. Are you more confused? Yeah. I'm really going to be glad for the in chief to be gone. But so here's the deal: Electoral College. You need 270 votes, which is 50% plus 1 of the electors. So there's 538 electors. You need 270 of those electors to vote for you in order for you to be president. Donald Trump has 307 sort of pledged electors because he won those particular states. Now, there has been, as we covered last week, a movement by the Democratic Party and the Hillary Clinton campaign to get 37 of those electors or more to basically either not vote for Donald Trump or to vote for Hillary Clinton. In either case, if Donald Trump was to get 269 or below electors, the House of Representatives basically will vote for the president. This is like a last-ditch Hail Mary effort. It's never been done before in the history of the United States. I don't think it was planned to be done in the history of the United States. But that has not stopped Hillary Clinton and the Democrats from trying to make this Hail Mary. And as always, they have enlisted their shock troops, which is B-list Hollywood actors. So let's see what the B-list Hollywood actors have to say and what they would like their message to electors. And Christian, why don't you leave our mics open on this, and we will play Name That B-list Celebrity, and we'll see how many we can get.
Republican members of the Electoral College, this message is for you. As you know, our founding fathers built the Electoral College to safeguard the American people from the dangers of a demagogue and to ensure that the presidency only goes to someone who is to an eminent degree endowed with the requisite qualifications.
An eminent degree.
Who is that?
Someone who is highly qualified for the job.
Deborah Messing.
The Electoral College was created specifically to prevent
Jamie
an
Cromwell.
unfit candidate from becoming president.
There are 538 members
He's
of
in
the
everything.
Electoral
I have
College.
no idea what this guy's name.
And just 36 other conscientious
I've seen him
Republican
in
electors
exactly.
can make a difference.
By voting your conscience
Her,
on
I've
December
seen as well.
19th.
Don't know.
and thereby shaping the future of our nation.
Brad.
I'm not asking you to vote for Hillary Clinton.
I'm not asking you to vote for Hillary Clinton.
Never seen that.
I'm
guy.
not asking you to vote
Moby.
for Hillary Clinton.
That's the only guy.
As you know, the Constitution gives
No, he
electors
was
the
on-
right
this
to
guy
vote
was
for
on
any
some sort of
eligible
a
person.
sitcom.
Any eligible person, no matter which party they belong to.
But it should certainly be someone you consider especially competent.
Especially competent
know who that
to
is.
serve as President of the United States of America.
By voting your
You
conscience,
see that guy.
you
he's
and other
everything, right?
brave
He's like in every
Republican
TV
electors
drama.
can give the House of Representatives the option to select a qualified candidate for the presidency.
I stand with you.
I stand with you.
I stand with you.
No idea.
I stand with you in support and solidarity with conservatives, independents, and liberals.
And all citizens of the United States.
She looks-
The American
You know
people
who that
trust
is?
that your voice speaks for us all.
And that you will make yourself heard through the constitutional responsibility granted to you by Alexander Hamilton himself.
What is evident is that Donald Trump lacks more than the qualifications to be president.
He lacks the necessary
she name-dropped
stability.
The founding father.
And clearly the respect for the Constitution of our great nation.
You have position,
The authority
And the opportunity to
So
go
why did
down
she
in the
get such a
books
short role?
as an American hero.
She got like
Who changed
2 words.
the course of history.
And you have my respect.
You have my respect.
You have my respect.
But who are
for your
you?
patriotism.
In service to the American people. Unite for America.
Who boy. Who boy. So, the interesting thing about this is, and this is my message to, not the electors, but this is my message to the people, whoever thought that was a good idea. Okay? I know that you are not really a huge Hillary Clinton fan. I mean, the people who are actually who think she's really a good person, I think those people are few and far between. What it really is that you've been scared by the establishment, particularly the establishment media. The fear of God, well, the fear of Trump has been put into you, right? That this guy is, and all you got to do is read the New York Times, Washington Post, any of these op-eds, that this guy is going to be just the worst, some sort of fascist dictator. He's going to just destroy everything that was laid out. And what's the funny part about this is that you're trying to subvert the sort of spirit of the Constitution. You're trying to make an end around the system because you're scared that this guy might subvert the system. So you got to make a choice. It's got to be one or the other. Either the system that you are in support of and that you believe should exist, that is the United States government as it stands and the rules as they stand, either they are sufficient to prevent a tyrant from rising up and taking over the country. Either we have enough checks and balances to prevent a Nazi Germany or a Stalinist Soviet Russia situation from occurring, in which case Donald Trump is not a threat, or we do not have a system that is sufficient, making Donald Trump a threat and making, technically, anyone a threat. Because think about this. Donald Trump is 60-something years old, all right? I am not a Donald Trump supporter. I am an anarchist. I do not vote. I do not believe anybody should be president. And here's the reason why. Because Donald Trump is 60-something years old. And he's been in the public eye since he was in his 30s. And up until the last year or year and a half, I never heard the phrase, Donald Trump is dangerous. Because you know what? Donald Trump wasn't dangerous. But for those of you out there who are pushing this thing through, who are trying this end around, trying this Hail Mary, you're pushing the idea that Donald Trump isn't dangerous, but President Trump is dangerous. So before there was any thought that he might be President Trump, he wasn't dangerous. But I just want to remind you who you are suggesting is the less dangerous option. Christian, if you will.
So, that is the land of unconfirmed reports.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit?
No, I'm sure it did.
I want to just do this one more time. Christian, can you please just play that one more time?
So, that is the land of unconfirmed reports.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit?
No, I'm sure it did.
In case you don't know who she's talking about, we came, we saw, he died. That was Muammar Gaddafi. After the illegal invasion, bombing, takeover of Libya, which is a hellhole right now, just completely awash in ISIS at this very moment. Do you know how Gaddafi died? That she's laughing about his death, chuckling. Do you know how he died? Now, he may have been a horrible person. He was certainly a dictator. No question about that. And as a voluntarist, I'm against the state, period. So I'm certainly against dictators. But the man was beaten, dragged through the streets by the people who were taking over. And he was killed by being sodomized with a knife on video, which was then uploaded to the internet. A beaten man having a knife shoved up his ass and then bleeding to death. And she's laughing about it. And Donald Trump is dangerous. I just want you to think about that. Think about it. Think about the narratives that are being constructed. Donald Trump may turn out to be a terrible president. But as far as I know, this is not a man who has ever laughed about instigating and instituting a situation where someone else was murdered. But that's not the narrative that carries. That's not the narrative that carries because, Christian, we have a situation where we have a media that is not doing their job. And that is our second, going to be our second news story. But I guess, I feel like I'm going a little over the top here. But one thing that I do want to say, I just want to have one final note on this Donald Trump thing. And is Donald Trump dangerous? We talked with Peter Kallman on his first appearance about Austrian economics and the idea that if you have something and I want it, that there are basically only two ways that I can get it.
Yeah.
The nonviolent way, which is called the economic means, or the violent way, which is called the political means, right? If you have $20 and I want it, nonviolently, I either have to ask you for it or trade you for it, right? That's the economic means. The one thing I want everybody to remember is that Donald Trump has spent his entire life using the economic means.
Yeah.
He's gotten what he's gotten. Now, he may have done things a little shadily at times. He may have used legal and financial loopholes to not pay a certain amount of taxes. I can't be mad at him about that, right? But the one thing that, as far as we know, he has never done is that there is not a dollar in his bank account that he has received by putting a gun in someone's face or threatening violence against somebody.
Yep.
Because he hasn't been in politics. He hasn't used the political means, and that's what the political means are. And I think that's something for people to remember when those people who are scared of Trump. If you think that someone who is truly interested in violent coercion, someone who is truly interested in violently making other people do things, would spend their entire life until they were in their 60s with using the economic means, the nonviolent means. And then all of a sudden, as an old man, would decide that they're really interested in the violent means. It's just not.
Also,
realistic.
too, he's a high-level businessman. He's got a brand and a name to protect. Do you think this guy is going to want to go in there and sabotage that? Like, he's going to do, whether he does a good job or not, I don't know. Can't read the future, but he's going to do his best because he's got a brand. He's got an ego to protect. He's got a brand to protect.
And I think that it's a big thing for the guy. It's one of the strangest things that of all of the people that I've seen in politics in my entire life, that this fear notion has been pushed against this guy.
Yeah.
He's a known commodity. I don't want to talk a lot about it because people will be like, you're a Trump supporter. It's not that I'm a Trump supporter, but I'm a fear opponent.
Exactly.
I'm an opponent of fear. And when I see fear being brought up, the truth is what knocks fear down. Logic is what knocks fear down. People are sometimes surprised. I make these Vinstradamus predictions, and people are surprised that they're like, what? Like, wow, that's crazy. How did you know that was going to happen? And it's like, stop and think. People are people. Humans are humans. We're not unique snowflakes. History repeats itself.
Yep.
If you know a little history and you know a little human nature, you can pretty much predict how people are going to behave in any given situation. And we know Donald Trump's history. His history has been public.
Exactly.
As far as I know, there's no pertinent secret emails. The dude can't even get away with saying grab him in the pussy. You know what I mean? How's he going to get away with secret emails? So speaking of emails, the continuing saga of the media, and this is our second story. We'll start with the Russian propaganda. The true fake news that is coming from out of the corporate media. And our favorite character in this ongoing saga, this ongoing story, is Jeff Bezos owned Washington Post, who are just perhaps the worst journalists ever. And they just seem to be getting worse. So to recap, let's recap the Washington Post narrative. And this is the narrative about Russian propaganda and Russian interference in this election. Got the WAPO, there we go. So first, what we have from the Washington Post that we reported on, I believe it was a couple weeks ago, or it may have been last week, was they come out and they say there's a secret CIA assessment that says Russia was trying to help Trump win the White House. That's their first thing, okay? So then Glenn Greenwald goes after him. He said there's no evidence. So they try to kind of backtrack it a little bit, and they're like, well, that's kind of true, but next. Then they say, well, yeah, but the FBI, there was, but the FBI was there too, and they gave differing accounts to lawmakers. So the FBI said, well, we don't really have any evidence that Russia was hacking or trying to get involved in the election, even though the CIA believes that they were. So then, of course, everybody in what I'm calling now the real news, the alternative media, said, well, clearly this is propaganda from the Washington Post, and unable to leave well enough alone. These guys are just unbelievable. Next. This is what we've got now. Oh, no. The FBI and the CIA are in agreement that Russia aimed to help Trump win the White House. And coming out of this, I just want to read an excerpt from this, because how they are doing this whole narrative is something that I really haven't seen. A lot of people are likening this to the weapons of mass destruction during the run up to the Iraq War, where it was basically fake news. But I just want to read this. So basically, what they're saying in this new article is that the Director of National Intelligence, Jim Clapper, was basically the one who had said that, yes, Russia is involved, and the CIA says so. The FBI Director, Comey, is supposedly the one who had said, no, the FBI doesn't have any evidence. Now, the Washington Post says this: the positions of Comey and Clapper, now saying that they agree, were revealed in a message that CIA Director John Brennan sent to the agency's workforce Friday. And the message said, quote, earlier this week, I met separately with FBI Director James Comey and Director of National Intelligence Jim Clapper, and there is strong consensus among us on the scope, nature, and intent of Russian interference in our presidential election. Brennan said, comma, according to U.S. officials who have seen the message. So, the Washington Post has not seen the message. The Washington Post has not talked to Brennan, who was the one who saw the message and was reporting this. Instead, they have spoken to U.S. officials. Now, who are these U.S. officials? If you go down, it says, in a closed-door Senate briefing, CIA officials said it was now quite clear that electing Trump was one of Russia's goals, according to officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss intelligence matters. Officials close to the FBI and CIA now say, these are those same anonymous officials, now say that lawmakers had misunderstood Comey's position. Quote, the truth is that they were never all that different in the first place, an official said. Similarly, officials said Clapper and Brennan saw the intelligence the same way. So, Christian, what we have here, let's try to explain this. It is the Washington Post, okay? Their source is an anonymous official. This official, who is unnamed, they don't say what part of the government they're in, they don't say what their background is, they don't say what access they have. They say that they're close to the FBI and CIA. This official, who is totally anonymous, who we have no idea who they are, is quoting a guy who's Brennan, right? He is the CIA director, who's quoting a message, or he's relaying information about a secret meeting that he was in with two other guys. And he's it does not make any. No, it's Brennan wrote, see, that's how confusing.
It's so confusing.
That's how confusing this whole thing is. And these are the people who are talking about fake news,
right.
who are claiming that alternative media doesn't have sources, alternative media is making things up, alternative media, it needs to be fact-checked. How do you fact-check that article?
Exactly. It's not possible.
How could you even, Snopes needs to put a false on that, because it's like, you cannot. How do we know that it's not just made up? How do the editors allow that even in? What evidence do we have that the Washington Post, that the authors of this are not just making it up? Or that the official who's talking to them, if this official is an intelligence official, how do we know that this intelligence official isn't passing them information meant to be propaganda?
Yeah,
that's what they do. That's what the CIA does. They're intelligence officials. An intelligence official speaking on condition of anonymity is about the least trustworthy thing that you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
That's not a source. That's not a source. But you know what's funny? We've got some background from a supposed purveyor of fake news who has a former intelligence official who goes on the record with his name, Zero Hedge. We've got NSA whistleblower destroys Obama's Russian narrative. Hard evidence points to an inside leak, not hacking. A group of retired senior intelligence officials, including the NSA whistleblower William Binney, former technical director of world geopolitical and military analysis of the NSA, okay, that's high, have posted an open letter on consortiumnews.com that destroys the Obama administration's Russia hacking narrative. Within the letter, Binney argues that, thanks to the NSA's extensive domestic data collection network, any data removed remotely from Hillary Clinton or DNC servers would have passed over fiber networks and therefore would have been captured by the NSA, who could have then analyzed packet data to determine the origination point and destination address of those packets. As Binney further notes, the only way the leaks could have avoided NSA detection is if they were never passed over fiber networks, but rather downloaded to a thumb drive by someone with internal access to servers. So, Christian, let's go over what it is that this guy is saying, because this is really, really, really important. And it makes total sense. For me, with my former software background, former hacker, what he says is a total duh moment.
Right.
It's so self-evident. So the fact it adds back and it goes back to the idea that if the FBI says we don't have evidence, and the Director of National Intelligence, who is getting things from the NSA, the CIA, if they are saying we don't have evidence, what this NSA former technical director is saying. Now, this is a technical director of world geopolitical and military analysis. He knows what the capabilities of the NSA are. He's an NSA whistleblower. And what he's saying is this. He's saying, look, Hillary Clinton's server is in the United States. He's a whistleblower, and he's basically saying a lot of what Snowden said. They're capturing everything. All of the data that's moving to and from Hillary Clinton's server, they can read the packets. They know if it's going to or from, and where it's to. They can see the transmission. This is important because they have looked into this. The NSA has looked into it. The CIA has looked into it. The FBI has looked into it. And they don't have any evidence that would indicate some weird transfer of data out of those servers. Because if they did, And what he says in the article is, if they did, they could easily say, we have evidence that there was hacking and that this data was transferred back and forth. And they can do that without jeopardizing any classified information, without jeopardizing anything. But because they can't do that, it indicates that it's a leak. Now, this makes a lot of sense. This is really self-evident.
Right. Yep.
It's really, really self-evident. This guy knows what the capabilities of the NSA is. And here are these intelligence officials writing an open letter to Congress saying, what are you doing? There's no evidence of this. But that's not being reported by the mainstream media.
Yeah, it's terrible.
That's not being reported by the mainstream media. The only place that you can get that sort of information now is the alternative media.
Alternative media.
Is the independent media, which is being called fake news. And the move to ban the fake news is ramping up. So if you are thinking that you're still happy that you're going to actually be able to get some of this information, you're going to be able to see zero hedge, well, in Germany, and I think that Germany is going to be the test case for this, in Germany, you might not have been able to see that zero hedge article, at least not on Facebook. Because here's the deal. Germany is set to fine Facebook $500,000 for every fake news post they don't delete. Germany now says if Facebook refuses to deal with fake news in a timely manner, quote unquote fake news, it will fine the social media platform 500,000 euros, around $525,000, for each false or hate speech item it fails to remove within 24 hours. Thomas Oppermann, chairman of Germany's Social Democratic Party, suggests a strict law with concurrent stiff penalty might be the best method of combating the plethora of, quote, fake news now apparently flooding the interwebs. Quote, Facebook did not avail itself of the opportunity to regulate the issue of complaint management itself, Oppermann told Der Spiegel in an interview Friday. Now market-dominating platforms like Facebook will be legally required to build a legal protection office in Germany that is available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So they're going to flag fake news, and if Facebook doesn't take down what they flag, $500,000 fine. And this is not just in Germany. We don't have the $500,000 fine at the current time, but the system is being put in place, even in the United States, to flag. And who will be doing the flagging? Who will be deciding whether or not things from activist posts, things from Zero Hedge, things from InfoWars, whether the alternative media stories get to you on the platforms that you're on? Well, one person who's going to be in charge is Associated Press. We got that AP story there. Associated Press will partner with Facebook to flag fake news. The Associated Press announced Thursday it will join Facebook to help identify and debunk, that's a quote, news stories being shared online that are false. According to the AP announcement, quote, when AP or another participating fact-check organization flags a piece of content as fake, Facebook users will see that it has been disputed, and there will be a link to the corresponding article explaining why. That flag will follow the content if a Facebook user chooses to share it. Quote, AP has done some of the most thorough fact-checking in the news business, said Sally Busby, AP's incoming executive editor. This initiative is a natural extension of that tradition and of the AP's long-standing role setting the standards for accuracy and ethics in journalism. So, Christian, we've got a censorship regime. If you want to jump over so people can see you there, sir, we've got a censorship regime loading up. And who will censor the censors? If the Associated Press is the fact checker, who fact checks the Associated Press?
Right.
I mean, we just showed the difference between a Washington Post article and a Zero Hedge article. And in terms of journalistic standards and journalistic ethics, and it was articles on the same topic. In terms of standards and ethics, it's the fox guarding the hen house at this point. Like, you can't. It really is crazy.
That's why it's so important that we're doing what we're doing, and also that people are keeping up with everything outside of Facebook, outside of social media. Get on the email list, get on everything that you can to stay in touch, because we will be going over this stuff as we have been. So,
and hopefully we can stay up.
Right.
I mean, I would hate to see this information sort of go into the memory hole. And I tell everybody, read 1984.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm all over this stuff, if you haven't read 1984, go read it. Don't watch the movie. The real stuff isn't in the movie. The movie is actually kind of boring. In 1984, the protagonist, the hero, Winston Smith, he works for the Ministry of Truth. At that point, there are no more independent newspapers. His whole job is censoring news, changing history around, basically creating fake news for the regime, creating something that's more than propaganda. Mm-hmm. Because it is really altering history.
Yeah.
If you're able to remove out of sight all of the competing narratives and you only have the one narrative, you have control of history. Because 10 years later, when somebody goes back to look and see what happened, that's what they're going to be looking at. They're going to be looking at the archives of these news stories. Mm-hmm. And if Google, Facebook, Twitter, it's not just about right now. That's what people have to understand. It's not just about right now. It's about 5 years, 10 years. We have very short memories. We have a short memory as a culture. And if 10 years down the road, all of these competing narratives, the things that we're presenting now, never mind if people see them now. Because relatively few people see what we're doing compared to what like CNN is doing. But when a student, a young person who's maybe 8 years old now, who wasn't following that now, isn't following what we're doing now, but they're getting ready to go and vote. And they go and they want to look at the history and they want to inform themselves. It won't be there.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy. Also, adding to that too, it's very, 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 even more important that people get the skills and the knowledge to fact check for themselves and to understand how to take that information and debunk it and break it down, either debunk it or make it true. Understand that it's a statement, it's a true statement. Get the skills and the knowledge to do that. So I think that's even more important than understanding how to do your own research,
how to read the news,
right.
How to very few people have a journalism background. Very few people understand why, up until recently, the idea of an anonymous source being your entire source for a very important article is not up to the standards of journalistic ethics. Mm-hmm. It's just simply not. Not on something that's about the government, not on something that can actually affect public policy, perhaps on something where there's some other hard evidence, like you were given some documents by somebody who decided to stay anonymous, but you were able to see the documents. But not just like, oh yeah, that my anonymous source said that he saw a note that was about a meeting. No, dude, no, absolutely not. So in terms of following this fake news story, and like you said, people understanding how to read for themselves, sometimes the best thing is to have some perspective. And so in terms of this fake news sort of situation that's going on, we put together Activist Post. Activist Post has been covering this as good as anybody, especially because we're on all those lists, so we have a vested interest in trying to get the truth out there about it. If you want, there's 3 stories. These headlines You could go and find them on Activist Post, and I think that these are great. This will give you the full background. The first one is a Brandon Smith article. It's called "What is the Real Purpose Behind Fake News Propaganda?" Excellent, goes into why this is actually happening. The second one is a Kurt Nimmo article. Nearly 50% of Americans think government should take action against fake news, really getting into sort of how this has affected, how effective this has been as propaganda in terms of moving the public policy decision. And then Joe Jankowski with Facebook Will Fight Fake News with help from fact checker Snopes and ABC News. That goes a little further into the logistics of how they are seeking to fact check us, how they're seeking to cut us off from Facebook. And Facebook it's a super important platform for us at Activist Post. I mean, we're broadcasting there live now, and 500,000 followers on Activist Post Facebook. I would encourage you to go and follow. I would also encourage you, if you're watching, please share. Share. That's how we keep this thing moving. That's the role that you can play in spreading the truth. Because yes, I know if you're watching this and you're on Facebook and you use Facebook, chances are you have people on your Facebook who are your Facebook friends who disagree with you politically, or who might even up until this point have thought this was all fake news. But you know what? Maybe they take 5 minutes, and maybe their mind gets a little bit changed, and maybe that question of doubt, maybe they start to look a little more critically at the things that the mainstream media is doing. And that's the gift that you can give to them, you can give to society, and you can really give to yourself. And if you have kids, that you can give to your kids to ensure that they're going to have at least the level of information as they grow up that you have now. So in terms of a level of information, and in terms of, again, showing the juxtaposition of mainstream media and the alternative independent media, the next thing I want to talk about is Syria, where there has been a lot of propaganda. It's hard to wade through it all. Aleppo, the fighting has essentially ended. The Syrian and Russian coalition have won in Aleppo. I mean, if you've seen pictures of Aleppo, there are no winners there. But the rebels, a lot of them U.S.-backed and armed, many of them associated with Islamic groups that are on the terrorist lists of even the U.S., have been essentially defeated in that region, and the kind of mop-up and evacuation is taking place. Before I show this, though, great video. Journalist Eva Bartlett, who was at a UN panel talking about mainstream media's narrative as versus the independent alternative media narrative of what's really going on in Syria. Christian.
I'm Christopher Ronneberg with the Norwegian newspaper Aftenposten. A question or two questions for Ms. Bartlett here. As a journalist, I'm sure you can appreciate getting other impressions than empirical impressions from the ground. When you talk about the Syrian people and what the Syrian people want, how can you quantify that? Do you have any independent surveys where you can actually document that? And secondly, you talk about the corporate media, the Western media, the lies, and all of this. Could you explain what you think might be the agenda from us in the Western media, and why we should lie, why the international organizations on the ground should lie, why we shouldn't believe all these absolutely documentable facts that we see from the ground, these hospitals being bombed, these civilians who are talking about the atrocities that they have been experiencing. How can you justify calling all of us liars?
Sure.
Thank you.
I mean, there are certainly honest journalists amongst the very compromised establishment media. let's start with your second question. So, international organizations on the ground. Tell me which ones are on the ground in eastern Aleppo. Yeah, okay, I'll tell you, there are none. There are none. These organizations are relying on the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which is based in Coventry, UK, and which is one man. They're relying on compromised groups like the White Helmets, which, let's talk about the White Helmets. The White Helmets were founded in 2013 by a British ex-military officer. They have been funded to the tune of $100 million by the US, UK, and Europe and other states. They purport to be rescuing civilians in eastern Aleppo and Idlib, yet no one in eastern Aleppo has heard of them. And I say no one, bearing in mind that now 95% of these areas of eastern Aleppo are liberated. The White Helmets purport to be neutral, yet they can be found carrying guns and standing in the dead bodies of Syrian soldiers. And their video footage actually contains children that have been recycled in different reports. So you can find a girl named Aya who turns up in a report in month, say, August, and she turns up in the next month in 2 different locations. So they are not credible. The SOHR is not credible. Unnamed activists are not credible. Once or twice, maybe, but every time, not credible. So your sources on the ground, you don't have them. As for your agenda, not your, but the agenda of some corporate media, it is the agenda of regime change. How can the New York Times, I was reading it this morning, or how can Democracy Now!, which I was reading the other day, maintain until this day that this is a civil war in Syria? How can they maintain until this day that that the protests were unarmed and nonviolent until, say, 2012? That is absolutely not true. How can they maintain that the Syrian government is attacking civilians in Aleppo when every person that's coming out of these areas occupied by terrorists is saying the opposite?
So, the agenda is regime change. And in the Middle East, regime change often, if not always, is for the reason of oil. Now, Syria is a little bit different. Syria is different because, unlike, say, Iraq or Saudi Arabia or Iran, it does have oil reserves in the ground, but it's not they're not huge oil reserves like they are in particularly Iraq or Saudi Arabia. But this fighting, this regime change, I wanted to go into a little bit of what Syria does represent, though, because it's very, very important. Now, on the show, we covered the DAPL, Dakota Access Pipeline. We covered the protests. A few weeks ago, I talked about shale oil up in North Dakota and what the pipeline represented in terms of bringing that oil onto the market. How without those pipelines, you're limited in the amount of oil that even if you can bring it up out of the ground, you don't want to store it. Anything you bring up out of the ground in that month, you want to be able to ship out and sell. Otherwise, leave it in the ground. It doesn't make sense. The ground is a better place for storing oil than out of the ground. So we talked about why the Dakota Access Pipeline was particularly important in terms of the U.S. decreasing its foreign oil reserves. Dakota Access Pipeline has been stopped by this administration. This administration, at the same time, funding a civil war in Syria. And Syria is about pipelines. To understand Syria, and to understand the competing interests, when you understand the pipelines, it becomes very, very clear. Christian, if you would, the Syria pipelines. This is what the battle in Syria is about. 2 pipelines. There is the pipeline that you see in red. These are oil pipelines that travels from Iran, sitting on the Persian Gulf. It goes up sort of northwest through Iran, then cuts west, sort of in the area between Baghdad and Erbil in Iraq. Incidentally, the exact area that ISIS went and took over. And then it goes west through Syria, where it ends at, I believe the port that it ends at is Homs, where it is put onto tankers and shipped into Europe. Now, that particular pipeline, this is, this may be a gas pipeline, as a matter of fact, oil and gas. That is a Russia-backed. Now, then, there is a U.S.-backed pipeline. That is the Qatar-Turkey pipeline that goes from Qatar, from Doha, basically, outside of that, cuts through Saudi Arabia, and then cuts up through Jordan, U.S. ally. So Saudi Arabia is a U.S. ally, Jordan is a U.S. ally, and then needs to go through Syria to get to Turkey, a NATO member. So you've got U.S. ally, U.S. ally, U.S. ally, not a U.S. ally, and then up to a U.S. ally. And you'll notice that this pipeline cuts straight through Aleppo. And this is a U.S.-backed pipeline. So whoever controls Syria gets all of the pipeline access. The battle for Syria is a battle for who's going to have the pipeline. And it's also the battle for northern Iraq. Iraq right now, the regime in Iraq is very, very friendly to Iran. There are Iranian troops up in the area north of Baghdad right now. And so this is the geopolitics of oil and natural gas. These are energy geopolitics. And if you want to have an understanding of conflicts in that region, you're always going to look for it's either about getting it out of the ground, either the oil or natural gas, or moving it along pipelines. Afghanistan, same situation, pipelines. Pipelines. And Ukraine. Little known, about this particular administration and the interesting conflagration that's going on in Ukraine. Do we have the article from Wall Street Journal from back in 2014, Biden and Kerry here? So Joe Biden's son and a Kerry family friend back in May of 2014, which is just after the Ukrainian Revolution, they joined the biggest Ukrainian natural gas producers board. And that region is huge for natural gas. I think something like 80% of the natural gas that goes into Europe passes through Ukraine or is generated in Ukraine. So you want to know about the war in Ukraine? Let's talk about the pipelines, Christian. That's what the war in Ukraine is about. So if you see where the fields are, that eastern Ukraine region, see the gas travels into Ukraine from Russia and Belarus and then travels into Europe. But look at all those fields in that area of Donbass and also Crimea. So all of the disputed areas that are being fought over just happen to have natural gas fields and the pipelines already in place to sell them into Europe. You know, it's interesting, Christian. We get fed a narrative that's about religious strife, that's about ethnic identity, that's all of these different things. But always coincidentally, there's the money at the bottom. There's the money at the bottom. And in that region, the oil, the natural gas, it's all about that. And who's got control? Have you ever read the book or seen the movie Dune?
No.
Dune the movie's really, really cool. The book is incredibly long, but it's also very, very cool. It's funny because the planet that it takes place on is great sci-fi piece. I think there's maybe 4 or 5 books in the series. The planet it takes place on is called Arrakis. And it's a desert planet, right? And there are 3 different houses, families that are basically that rule different parts of the galaxy that are trying to control this because they mine spice, which is basically the poop of this giant worm. And that spice is the fuel for their starships. And whoever controls the spice controls the galaxy. So whoever controls the mining and getting the resources, the fuel out of the planet Arrakis, a desert planet. Yeah, it's a lot about the Middle East, so it's a very cool allegory. But what I love about it is that it gets into and it has all of these different ethnic divides and all of this, but at the core of it all is energy. You got to have energy. As human beings, we have to have energy. The fight for energy. And energy independence is so important.
Very interesting.
It's one topic that we haven't covered a lot because it tends to be a very technical topic, but personal energy independence I'm very big on myself. I've got solar panels at my house. They're covered up so that they're not used, but like just in case. I mean, I think that more people, they're not that expensive. You can buy solar panels at Fry's, but
Home Depot.
Having two or three 75-watt solar panels and knowing how to, hook them up to your car battery so that you can generate DC power. In the worst emergency, if things went wrong, if you have sun and you have some solar panels and you have a car battery, you can at least power up your laptops, power some 12-volt DC lights, power, at least maybe a little bit of a heater. The basics, but very few people have it. We don't think about energy. We don't think about energy. But when you start thinking of these conflicts in terms of energy, I think it starts opening your mind, right? And oil in the ground, keep it in the ground. I mean, give me the alternative. Give me the alternative. I'm ready for it. And we actually have a story that gets into a little bit of that, but we'll do that story, I think. We'll save that one until after our interview with Jeff Berwick of the Dollar Vigilante. So let's go ahead, let's go to break, and then we will come back with our interview with Jeff Berwick. So, Christian, it's that time of year again.
It's getting cold, man.
It is getting cold. It is getting cold. But you know where it's not getting cold?
Acapulco?
That's right. And you know where we're going to be in February?
Acapulco?
Yep. Last week of February, Anarchapulco. I'm speaking down there this year.
It's going to be
So I know you're looking forward to seeing me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm looking forward to broadcasting. We're going to do some interviews. Who are you interested in seeing down there?
Of course, Jeff Berwick.
Well, yeah, it's his conference, obviously.
Larkin Rose.
One of my favorite anarchists.
Adam Kokesh.
Well, Adam's always fun.
Yeah, we saw him here. Lauren Southern.
Hot. also brilliant. So I'm interested in seeing her.
Luke Rukowski.
Yeah, from We Are Change, of course.
And Roger Ver.
The Bitcoin Jesus.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome.
That should be awesome. Well, and don't leave out some friends of the show, like activist post contributor Derek Bros. He's going to be down there.
Great, yeah.
And Backwards is going to be performing. They're like the headlining
I can't wait
act.
for that.
Very cool, anarchist, kind of rap punk. Very, very cool. I haven't seen them yet, but I'm interested. And, you can't go wrong. Acapulco, 5-star hotel, Mundo Imperial. It's going to be super amazing. Drinks, sun, I'll be by the pool for sure. So, it's actually rented out the entire spot just for Anarchapulco.
That's incredible.
Well, it is the biggest anarchist conference in the world. right? So 5-star hotel, Mundo Imperial in Acapulco.
Can't go wrong.
Can't go wrong, man. And if anybody wants to join us, and I hope that they do come and join us, go and visit anarchapulco.com. And when you buy your tickets, use the coupon code Armani, just like Vin Armani. Use the coupon code Armani, and they're going to get 10% off their tickets, Christian.
Save 10%. Can't go wrong.
Welcome back to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on Facebook with our content partner, Activist Post. So that is facebook.com/Activist Post. Also on YouTube at youtube.com/Vin Armani, and on Twitter/Periscope. You can go to Twitter at Vin Armani to see that stream. And of course, we are every week on Monday morning, 10 a.m. Pacific time, right here, live in Las Vegas. So today, our guest is Jeff Berwick, the founder of the Dollar Vigilante. Now, this guy, as you will see in this interview, travels quite a bit, and he was unable to get on Skype for our interview right now, but just a little while earlier, we went ahead and recorded this interview with him, and so I will leave you with that, and we will come right back. Christian, please. So, today my guest is Jeff Berwick. Jeff is a Canadian-born entrepreneur, libertarian, and anarcho-capitalist activist. In 2009, he founded the Dollar Vigilante, an anarcho-capitalist blog focusing on gold, silver, mining stocks, Bitcoin, and offshore banking. And in 2015, Berwick started Anarchapulco, the world's first and largest international anarcho-capitalist conference held in Acapulco, Mexico. The 2017 conference is set to be held at the Hotel Princess Mundo Imperial. And it just so happens that that is a conference that Christian and I will be attending and I will be speaking at. So, Jeff Berwick, welcome to the Vin Armani Show.
Thank you, Vin. It's a pleasure.
It's great to have you here. I would like to start on an interesting aspect of your recent history. I was having a debate with a friend of mine last week, very good friend, very old friend, and he's a bit of a socialist. And as the debate between an anarchist and a socialist always tends to end, once the socialist realizes that they're on the wrong end of the moral stick, he told me, well, then why don't you just, and of course, renounce your citizenship and move somewhere else, right? And so as anarchists, we've all heard this. But unique among very few people that I have met have actually taken that option. You being one of those people, it's something that you write about, it's something you talk about, it's something that you help other people to do. If you could, please, can you tell us why you chose to take that option, how you decided where to go, and sort of what it entailed?
Yeah, sure. First, it's kind of funny, isn't it, that you're there in the land of the free, the USA, and you have a socialist telling you that if you don't like the socialism in the US, you should go somewhere else. Kind of funny how that country changed quite a bit. Right. But that's a little bit of how history just seems to tend to happen over and over, because we didn't really have the internet before, so people didn't really know what's really happened before. Most of what people think about history is almost all totally wrong, all taught by the government and the government schools, and they give you all this stuff. So now we have the internet, so hopefully people start to wake up. But that is funny that you have a socialist in the U.S. telling you to get out of the U.S. if you don't like it so much. Right. So I guess, but that is interesting. The U.S. is becoming heavily social. Well, it is heavily socialist. It's I call it a mix between fascism and communism. I call it fascio-communist. Sure. I call it a fascio-communist police state. That's how crazy it's getting there. And it's also funny how people say, if you don't like it, why don't you leave? It's like, well, you're the one who's doing all this immoral stuff. Why don't you leave? Right. you know, I'm not doing anything to you. You are attacking me daily through your ideas and through the people who back up your ideas with force, with guns, which most socialists don't like, which is kind of funny because you can't really have very good socialism without guns with the government. But as far as for me personally, as you mentioned, I grew up in Canada, very cool, a place called Edmonton, which is where Edmonton Oilers hockey team, Wayne Gretzky and all that. Most people don't know and have never been there, but it's incredibly cold. It's for 6 months of the year, it's below freezing and well below freezing. It'd be minus 30 or minus 40 in Fahrenheit for weeks or even months at a time. So I grew up there, and I was like, why? I said to my family, like, why would you ever move here? Why are we here? And they didn't really have a good answer, which is kind of funny. But I was like, as soon as I can, I'm leaving. So pretty much as soon as I was able, became an adult, I got my high school badge of indoctrination from the government indoctrination camps that my mom wanted me to get, which I've never had to use ever, obviously. I don't think anyone's ever had to use it. I don't have, like, has anyone ever asked you for your high school diploma?
No, never, never.
No, never. So it's just a big scam. And so as soon as I did, the warmest place in Canada was Vancouver, so I moved there. And then, as you mentioned, I started up, or maybe you didn't mention, I started an internet company there that grew into the largest financial internet company in Canada, still is to this day, called Stockhouse.com. And as soon as I finished that, I was like, okay, it's still too rainy and too cold and way too socialist. Canada's even more socialist in many ways than the U.S. And high taxes, high regulation, the government medical system, which is horrible, absolutely atrocious. And so after that, I said, okay, I've got a little bit of time now because I sold my company and I bought a sailboat, a catamaran, a 35-foot catamaran. I tried to sail around the world just to figure out what was going on because I knew what I was seeing on television wasn't the truth at all. And of course, now we all know it's fake news. Or they call us fake news. But, they're the fake news,
exactly.
It's all Orwellian now. And so I sailed around the world. I tried to sail around the world. I sank it in El Salvador. And then I just bought a backpack and I just kept going. And I went to about 80 countries after that. And what I realized is every country I went to was not what they said it was. And in fact, most countries were a lot freer than the US and Canada in many ways. Not in every way, but in many ways. And so that opened my eyes a lot, and around that time I really started to learn a lot about libertarianism, about anarchism, about Austrian economics, all that kind of stuff I was studying the whole time. Well, not really studying, just reading all the time about all that stuff. And I just kept going, and eventually I lived in China for a while, and I actually ended up making a movie with Jackie Chan in China just by happenstance.
That's awesome.
And then I was living in Thailand, and I had a crazy Thai girlfriend. I had to leave because she was literally trying to kill me almost every day. And I thought, okay, I've been to about 100 countries now. Where should I go? Because I feel like settling down a bit. This is after about 6-7 years of just living in hotels, literally, just around the world, or on my boat for a year. And I thought, where's my favorite place? And I thought, well, you know, I love Mexico. It's funny because it's so close to where I'm from. I was kind of hoping it'd be further away, more exotic, more interesting.
Sure.
But I was like, Mexico is just phenomenal. I spent actually a year traveling through it on my sailboat, and I really only planned to maybe spend a week or two in Mexico, and I spent a year. In fact, I actually spent 3 months here in Acapulco, and I was only planning to spend 2 or 3 days here because I loved it so much. So then I just came back here, but I actually live what's called a perpetual traveler or prior taxpayer type lifestyle, which basically means I don't officially live anywhere. I actually do officially live in the Dominican Republic, but that's basically so I can avoid being extorted by governments around the world. And so I live that kind of lifestyle, and because of that, I don't technically really have to pay income tax anywhere in the world, and get treated a lot better by the governments wherever I go, because everywhere I go, I'm a tourist, and they always treat tourists pretty well. It's their own tax slaves that they really go after. So that's essentially why I've been living this way, although I do spend a lot of time here in Acapulco, Mexico.
Now, you are officially a citizen of the Dominican Republic. And
yeah, actually.
How does that occur? It's fascinating to me. It's one of those, people acquiring citizenship not by birth is it's a difficult thing, isn't it? I mean, I know that people talk about it, but I've rarely met somebody who's actually been able to do it.
Yeah, it's not easy at all, and I actually said this a few years ago that it's going to get harder and harder because they're trying to put in this tax systems all around the world. They're trying to nail everyone down into a tax system, and because of that, they're making it harder and harder for anyone to become a citizen of another country. There's still a few countries that offer it as they call it citizenship by investment, but those are generally going to be $300,000 and up to $5 or $10 million. Places like St. Kitts and even places like Cyprus and Malta. And other places, but in general, if you don't want to spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, it's quite hard. You generally have to be a resident of somewhere for a period of time, and that period of time can change, as every government rule can change. So I actually applied to be a resident of Dominican Republic about 10 years ago, and at the time they had a rule that you had to be resident for 2 years. You didn't have to necessarily be there most of the time, in fact hardly any of the time, but after 2 years you could apply for citizenship, and I wanted to get that because I wanted to get out of Canada, which has massive amount of taxation, and if you don't live in Canada and you live somewhere else, you don't have to pay taxes in Canada anymore, so I really like that idea, and I don't want to live there anymore anyway, and I never want to live there again, and so I applied, and it was supposed to be 2 years, and then as soon as my 2 years was up, they changed it to 3 years. Then when that was up, they changed it to 4 years, then 5 years, then 7 years, now 8 years, and so it was about 9.5 or 10 years, and I finally just got it a couple months ago. It was a lot of, it was not easy, but it actually now affords me a lot more options as far as not only taxes, but also travel. For example, I wanted to go to Iran recently because, of course, I don't think everything we're being told about Iran on CNN is necessarily exactly what's going on. And I've never been there before. And as a Canadian, I had to go through this lengthy process to get a visa to go to Iran. It took months. They wanted to know everything about me. And they said that when I get there, they're going to have a government person there, and the person's going to be with me the entire time that I'm in Iran.
Oh, wow.
Which, you know, being an anarchist, having this government person with you all day, is not going to be good. I'm probably going to end up in jail for something. And but being a Dominican, I can actually go there without a visa. So these just offers you more options if you have more. I call them slave cards, passports. It's actually ridiculous that we need them to travel with not to private property, just to places. And so that passports were only actually put into place after World War I, which actually a lot of these wars are put in World War I, World War II to bring in more bigger world governments. So World War I was brought in to get everyone into passports. World War II was brought in to essentially lock things down even more. We have to stop this, and then all the problems that caused, and they're going to bring in the European Union after that, so that'll stop the wars that they already started in order to bring in this bigger one world government system, and that sort of thing. And then of course of the false flag terrorist attack of 9/11, which was brought in to bring in just massive police states in the US and Europe and all over the place. So but in general, yeah, passport to getting a second one is very hard, although I'm about to get a third one. I've actually just got an email from the president of Liberland, Vin Armani. I don't know if you know Liberland.
I think I have heard about it, but if you tell the audience a little bit about this.
Yeah, it's anarcho-capitalist started it. So it's a piece of land in between Serbia and Croatia that is about 7 square miles, very small. It's in between like 2 rivers or something like that. And neither country, for really detailed and specific reasons, don't want to claim it's their land. It will actually break all kinds of treaties if they do. So it's really unclaimed land. So Vin Armani, anarcho-capitalist, went there and he planted a black and yellow flag and he said, "This is Liberland." And they've been growing it like crazy. They actually, I think they just got recognized as a country in Guatemala. I think they're about to get recognized by at least one European country coming up. I don't think I'm allowed to say which. And because of my involvement in trying to help them, and they've been raising a lot of money, and they actually have billions of dollars sitting on the sidelines if this becomes a real country to make it into essentially a narco-capitalist Hong Kong. Which will have massive benefits, by the way, for the Serbia and Croatia being so close to that much wealth. But they're both, you know, trying to fight it off. It's actually mostly, I believe, I think it's Croatia. Yeah, Croatia is the one who really is trying to stop it. Serbia doesn't seem to care as much, but it's ongoing, a little bit of a battle. But I just got an email from the president of Liberland saying that due to my help with the founding of the country, that I can get citizenship now. So whenever I go over there, I'm going to get my third passport. I've also thought about applying for Sealand. I don't know if you know about that.
Yep, of course. Yeah, that's one of the original sort of experiments, if you will, but it's been around for a very long time.
Yeah, and that one's a little bit more gimmicky. It's like an oil platform.
Sure, right.
But yeah, the more passports, the better. It just gives you more options. It's kind of funny as an anarchist to want more passports because, of course, as an anarchist, we don't think we should need a passport. We don't think we should need some government identification and be checked everywhere we go to make sure we are who we say we are by government people. But in this topsy-turvy world where everything's upside down, it actually makes sense to have more passports, not less.
You're very much, I guess, what people would term a citizen of the world. I mean, you have taken the philosophy and you're living it on a daily basis. And one of the things that you are, I guess, very well known for, amongst the other things, I mean, I guess I didn't mention Anarchast, which is also your video series where you've involved and interviewed tons of different anarchists from around the world. But in particular, I mean, with your financial background, you help people to understand how they can protect their money and what the best kind of investment options or protection options are. What right now would you say is your number one, be it either currency or process or country that allows people to protect their money the best?
Well, you brought up how I started the Dollar Vigilante. The reason I started that was after my internet company, which was worth $240 million at the peak of the tech bubble in the year 2000, it went almost bankrupt a year later after the tech bubble burst. And I asked everyone, including like top Wall Street people, top MBAs, all these sort of people who went to school and learned all this stuff, which is mostly garbage. And I said, what happened? They said, oh, that just happens sometimes. And I was like, what? And so I went, and the first book I read was The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. He's another anarcho-capitalist.
Yes.
And he explained how the whole central banking system is actually a scam. It's a Ponzi scheme. And it's only meant to enrich the very, very, not just the 1%, the 0.00001%, and impoverish everyone else. And so once I learned that, I started writing the Dollar Vigilante and started telling people about Austrian economics and about central banks and how bad they are and how evil they are. And it's the same as government. I call myself a freedom fighter against mankind's two biggest enemies, the governments and the central banks.
I love it.
And so as far as what to invest in, from that standpoint, of course, I write the Dollar Vigilante, so the whole point of the Dollar Vigilante is surviving and prospering during and after the dollar collapse. If you look at fiat currencies, every fiat currency up until the modern ones have all collapsed, and they always will collapse. There's nothing backing them. They're just pieces of paper. But they just saw in India, just in the last month, how worthless they actually are. They just canceled 80% of the money that people had in their pockets. They just said, that's not worth anything anymore. It's just a piece of paper. Venezuela, same thing. This happens all the time, and this will happen to every currency, and it's actually ongoing process. The U.S. dollar has been collapsing since 1913, just inflation by the Federal Reserve. So I write a lot about that. So in order to protect yourself from those collapses, and of course those collapse, the financial system collapse, and for a period of time the entire economies will collapse, the best thing to get into is hard assets. And one of the hard assets that I include is Bitcoin, which isn't necessarily a hard asset, it's a virtual asset. But you asked me what's my favorite currency. By far, Bitcoin.
Mine as well.
Yeah, it outperformed every currency in the world this year, as it has most years. It was up 76% against every currency this year. It's up 200% since last summer. It's currently at around $780. It was $250 last summer. When I first got into it was in 2011 when it was at $3. So yeah, I obviously like Bitcoin a lot. I still see massive upside for it. As far as what countries to go to be more free, that's a really tricky question. It all depends. There is no free place on earth. Or the closest is Liberland, but Serbia or Croatia won't let people go on it yet. They'll arrest you if you try to go over there.
Oh wow!
Which is actually a war crime now. This is all going to get very interesting with Liberland, but. Yeah, you just have to find the place, and that's why actually one reason I started the Dollar Vigilante is to tell people to form this group, a community of people who knew these sort of things and wanted more freedom. And now we have thousands of people around the world who all have something we call TDV, the Dollar Vigilante groups. We have hundreds of them around the world in almost every country in the world, and it's mostly entrepreneurs and expats who have left their country that they were born in and gone somewhere else and made a life for themselves. So every country has its positives and negatives. You know, of the 100 countries I went to, I would say if I was forced to live in the U.S. or any of those other 95 countries, I can't think of too many. Well, there'd be Cuba. Yeah, even though there is some positives to living in Cuba as a foreigner, but still it's just way too latched down there, way too big a government, way too communist. Venezuela right now, I was just there earlier this year. That was already getting crazy, and it's gotten way crazier since. So I wouldn't live there. I haven't been to North Korea, but I probably wouldn't want to live in North Korea. But other than that, the U.S. is pretty close to the bottom of the list.
Interesting.
It's just too much government, too much regulation, too much fear all over the place. It's just that the mainstream media, fake news, just puts out just tons of fear. You can just sense it when you're there.
Sure.
I know you're in Vegas, so it's a little better. If I had to live in the U.S., it'd be Miami or Vegas, really.
I often tell people that Vegas is perhaps the last free, and it's not city of Las Vegas, I'll tell you, but it's Clark County, right? So outside, which most people who come to Vegas, they don't actually come to the city of Las Vegas, they come to unincorporated Clark County. And then, you know, you have Summerlin, which is basically just private land that Howard Hughes bought. It actually is, the entire city is private land. A lot of people don't know that. Summa Corporation owns it. But I often tell people that it's like the last free city, but it's getting less and less and less. So, yeah, that's why I'm here, you know.
Yeah, you know, you can still smoke in some places. You can still drink after a certain time.
Oh, absolutely. You can walk around with the alcohol on the street, you know. It's
So it's still got a little bit of freedom there, but other than that, you know, you go to a place like New York or something where if you call a transgender person and you don't say "G" or whatever the word is, you get charged $250,000. You know, it's just getting insane in so many of those places. And I just find like a place like Acapulco, everything you say about Vegas, you can do here. You can even do it quite a bit more. You can go out with cops and drink at 8 in the morning or wherever you want to go.
I love it.
Yeah, so it's very free that way. But you know, every place has its positives and negatives. But I've just found that most people just have no idea how much freer it is in other places, and that's why the media is always focused on that. So I'm sitting here in Mexico. I love it. I feel so safe here. Like I feel way safer than I feel in the U.S. or Canada. The chances of a cop kidnapping me here is 0%. You know, they just wouldn't even try because people around here would kill them. And that's good in my opinion because they're aggressing against people. You know, every place has got its positive and negative, but you know that's why they put on the TV in the U.S. You know, Mexico is so dangerous.
Don't go there. Whatever you do, don't go.
They don't want people to know. Like it's so close. It's literally like for some people, you just drive across the border and you can do almost anything here. This is almost like a free country. And so that's why even when they do let the Americans kind of go out to Cancun or Cabo, they try to make those areas as American as possible. That's actually why I don't like Cabo and Cancun. It feels just like you're in Florida or something. Everything's expensive. There's rules and regulations and cops all over the place. But as soon as you get outside of those places, you have quite a bit more freedom. So, you know, that's just in general. And that's one of the things that I've also found is travel is the best education you can get. You know, forget about college, forget about school. If you're a young person and you want to get a true education, which is actually learn how the world works, just travel for a while, and that's the best education.
So in February, speaking of travel, you're going to have quite a few anarchists of all different stripes and libertarians traveling down to you in Acapulco. So I'd like to talk a little bit about Anarchapulco for sure. It's great, awesome idea. I'm super excited to go down there and check it out. How did you come up with the idea for this conference? And if you could let people know what they could expect if they find themselves down in Acapulco in late February.
Yeah, the way I got the idea was kind of funny. I was going to a lot of freedom-related conferences in the U.S., and I'd always complain about it. So I'd go to Pork Fest up in New Hampshire, which I support, the Free State Project, and there'd be cops on every corner, and I'd say, when's the bar close? And then they'd be like, 12, and I'm like, well, what do we do after that? And it's like, well, go hide so you don't get arrested. It's like, why do they have these freedom conferences in the U.S.? It's one of the least free countries in the world.
Right.
And so I said that on Facebook, and someone just, I forget who it was, but I should thank whoever that was, said, why don't you have a freedom conference down in Acapulco where you spend a lot of time? And I thought, well, I don't know if a lot of people want to come, and there really is no true anarchist conference, so this is something totally new. So there's, Pork Fest is very, very freedom-minded. There's a lot of anarchists, but there's also a lot of statists. They have a lot of politicians and stuff like that who go to it, but they're very libertarian, but they're still statists. They're not anarchists. Freedom Fest is the biggest sort of what they call a freedom conference in the world, but it has probably more status than anarchists. Oh, actually, way more status than anarchists. The anarchists are a small minority. And then there used to be another one called Libertopia I used to go to in San Diego, but they shut down for personal reasons. And so I was thinking, well, no one's ever tried a true anarchist conference, a true anarcho-capitalist conference, just to make sure people understand the meaning when I say anarchist. I don't mean the communist people with black masks who blow up Starbucks and stuff like that. And so, being an entrepreneur, I just said, okay, well, let's just say we're going to do it, and we'll do it, and we'll just see what happens. That's just how you kind of figure out if these things are going to work or not. And the first one is 2015, and in February, and I wasn't expecting very many people. I was actually pretty resigned to maybe that no one will even come at all. And we got about, what was it, about 100 and, forget now, about 150 maybe.
That's pretty good for an international first time, yeah.
It was actually 250, yeah. Because I was expecting definitely no more than 50 or 100, and so I was shocked it was 250. And I had no plans to do it again the next year or anything. And at the end of the conference, a person shouted out, when are we doing it again next year? And I said, you know what, I never even thought about doing it again next year. Just, I'm surprised this one had any interest. And everyone was there. It was all 250 people said, we're coming back. And and I was like, okay. So we did it again this year. So February of 2016, we had about 500 people, so about double.
Excellent.
And every single person, not every, I'm sure there was a couple I didn't talk to, but everyone I talked to said, yeah, we're coming back. This is the best. And so we're doing it again in February 2017, and I'm definitely expecting well over 500. It could be as many as 1,000. We'll find out. You never know with these things. People just show up at the last minute a lot of times. And yeah, it's an amazing conference. It's really blossomed. It's got a real, it's a real thing now as opposed to when I first started it. So our tagline this year is evacuate the state, brave the future. We got so many great speakers coming, including yourself and Larkin Rose, Jeffrey Tucker, Adam Kokesh, Lauren Southern, Luke Rudowski, Julia Triansky, Barry Cooper of Never Get Busted Crew, Roger Veer, the Bitcoin Jesus, Rick Falkenny of the Swedish Pirate Party. So he actually founded the Pirate Party, which is actually growing immensely. It's actually almost becoming government in Iceland now.
Right, they won a ton of seats, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of these people are real world changers. People like Vitja Lika started up Liberland. These are the kind of people who are trying to create the new system that makes the old system obsolete. So with the anarchists before the internet and before Bitcoin specifically, there was a lot of just upset people, a lot of just depressed people, like, how are we going to change this? This is ridiculous, this system. And so a lot of them were just kind of just depressed. A lot of them weren't making a lot of money because a lot of them wanted to avoid the taxation system, and if you want to avoid that, you're going to have to go underground, and then you get arrested and all this kind of stuff. But now, thanks to the internet and Bitcoin, a lot of people are starting to make more money, and they're starting to get a lot more entrepreneurship going. And because of things like the internet and Bitcoin, there's a lot more opportunities for entrepreneurship. And so we've got so many people who are just changing things. We've got Christopher David of Arcade City, which is I
love Arcade City, yeah.
Yeah, it's an Uber competitor, but it's based on the blockchain. We've got Dan Larimer of Steemit.com. So that's an entirely new blockchain-based social media network, and of course couldn't come at a better time than right now, where Facebook and Google are all blocking fake news, which is pretty much all the truth. And so these are the people who are changing the world. So it's you haven't been before, but Vin, when you come down, you'll probably walk away like, wow, that's you needed like a week afterwards just to like process how many incredible people you met and how many incredible things people were working on, and also it's just a lot of fun. Just just on the beach in February in Mexico with a lot of freedom lovers in a very freedom-minded city.
Love it, love it. So if people are interested and they want to know more about Anarchapulco, it's anarchapulco.com. And actually, if people would like to go, they can get 10% off if they use, when they check out, if they use a coupon code with my last name, Armani. And we will actually have a link on all of these videos for everybody. So please check it out. I'm very excited about this. As a longtime anarchist, I had heard about it last year, but this year I'm super stoked to go. There's no way I'm going to miss it. So in terms of the other projects, dollarvigilante.com, I would encourage everyone to go and check out. What would you say is the sort of top issue that you guys are focusing on with Dollar Vigilante right now? What's the hot issue?
Oh, there's so many things. We're nearing the end of so many things right now in the financial and economic and monetary system. Everything's falling apart right now. India, as I mentioned, Venezuela, and then you have Europe. Europe is fracturing as we speak. That really leaves the question what's going to happen with the euro. Could completely collapse in the next couple of years. They're doing a war on cash, so they're trying to get cash get everyone out of cash and try to make it so everyone's in the banking system, and then they're already moving to negative interest rates. So essentially this massive government socialist democracy, which is very anti-freedom sort of system, backed by central banks, which is a tenet of communism, has sort of reached its final end of the rope. We're in the final end stages now. It might be still a couple of years, but not much more than that. When I first started the Dollar Vigilante in 2010, I said sometime between 5 and 10 years from now, this whole system ends. And we're now 6 years into it, almost 7. We're getting very, very close. And so we're just talking about that all the time. If you just check us out, actually the best way is just go on YouTube and look up our videos. We put out a video almost every day because there's so much stuff going on. We can't even cover half of it. And a lot of interesting stuff too about things like Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So we've made just massive amounts of money. I got a lot of people into Bitcoin at $3 in 2011.
That's great.
And last summer I got thousands of people I know just from the amount of people who have contacted me who all got into Bitcoin last summer around 250. It's now 780.
Fantastic.
And then we've gotten into other cryptocurrencies. There's a lot of exciting different ones. Things like gold and silver, that's been going up a lot. This was a great year for gold and silver. So pretty much everything we're into has been doing well, including mining stocks. We had some of them go up 500, 800% this year. So just a really good time. It's been down the last few months. Gold and silver's been down. The mining stocks have been down with everything going on with Trump. The whole market's kind of confused. But Bitcoin has continued just to power through. So interesting times, definitely.
I love it. So for those people who, and honestly, now is the time, things are volatile, and I think a lot of people want to protect their money and they want to make investments. So I would definitely encourage people to check out Dollar Vigilante because it's coming from the mindset of the exact people who are watching this show, and it makes a lot of sense, the things that you guys do. I want to thank you, Jeff. I'll definitely see you down in Mexico, and yeah, I hope to have you back on to talk about some other financial things as things start to pick up during this coming year. But Jeff Berwick, thank you very much for being on the Vin Armani Show, and we will definitely have you back again.
Thank you.
So, lots of great information from Jeff Berwick. Want to just thank him once again for coming on. And I would encourage everybody to go and check out anarchapulco.com. The link is on the description of this video if you're watching it on YouTube or on Facebook. And if not, and you decide that you want to go, which we would be happy to see you down there, and please stop and say hi and have a conversation with Christian and I. But if you decide to go, you can get 10% off on your tickets by using, excuse me, the coupon code Armani at your checkout. So we follow financial, and the reason why following markets right now is important is because we are going through a massive economic shift in both the US and worldwide, where the nature of money is changing, the nature of communications is changing. But in addition to that, the very nature of work is changing. And we've discussed this before on the show, but we have some new information and a story that I would like to share about the automation and artificial intelligence revolution that is occurring. And it's all about the cars. I've been talking for a long time about automation, and actually I have a video series on my YouTube channel called The Ascendant Project, which it's about 8 hours long, but I think you'll find it quite entertaining. And it's a deep dive into my prognostications, if you will, little Vinstradamus predictions regarding the world and the confluence of automation and debt and what it potentially means for all of us. So go and check that out. Some people know that I've been obsessed with automation for a very long time. My background's in software development, and the particular piece of software development that I was involved in was essentially automation, algorithms, and making things happen in the background and triggering them. So while I did not do any work on automated cars, I'm very, very interested in self-driving cars. And the company that is really, I think, making the biggest push, Tesla has the cars, but the company that's really putting their business model on the line is Uber. And some people may know that Uber already has been testing self-driving cars in Pittsburgh. They actually have a plan to be fully automated by 2020, which, if you think about that, that's not that long away. So Uber would like to have a fully automated fleet by 2020, the year 2020. And this week they started testing automated self-driving cars with a new fleet and a second version of their automated Volvo in their hometown of San Francisco. Now, California being the very sort of socialist, highly regulated state that they are, well, they didn't get through very many days before this happened, Christian. Uber ordered to stop self-driving vehicle service in San Francisco. So the state of California, the DMV, has said to Uber that they are going to need to get permits for their self-driving Volvo that you see there to continue operating in San Francisco. Now, Uber is challenging this and saying, well, there's a driver. In all of these tests, the car is driving itself, but there is a driver sitting in the seat just as a sort of safety measure. So they say, well, because we have a driver, we don't need any kind of special permit. Now, Apple has gotten special permits. Google has had permits for their self-driving cars that have been fully autonomous for years now. They've done millions and millions of miles on the roads of California. But this Uber change is truly revolutionary because Uber already has a system for dispatching the vehicles, for logging the miles, for everything that Uber does. And they just need to replace this one little piece, which is a driver. So one of the interesting things about these cars, Christian, we've talked about this. We talked a little bit about this with Peter Kallman on our last episode. It introduces, when you have self-driving autonomous cars, when you take even the driver's seat out of the equation, the configuration of the car changes. What a car is changes. Yeah. The way that you fuel the car changes because you have a self-driving car. That car can self-drive not just when you are there, but for instance, your car could drop you off, like let's say you're going to work, could drop you off at your office and then could go down the street to a charging station. and park and charge itself until you need to call it, like the Batmobile. And it also starts to, one of the interesting things is that it also starts to raise the idea of, does car ownership even make sense anymore?
Right.
Because if these self-driving cars are driving around all the time, or they just park and they sit, I mean, if I have access to a car and it's comparable to, say, what most people would pay on their car note, if you took your car note and your gas, your upkeep, and your insurance payment, right, every month. For some people, that's in the thousands, actually.
Yeah, it's quite a bit of money.
Depends on how you use your car, what kind of car you have.
Right.
That could be in the thousands.
And for businesses, too.
But you imagine if these cars were that available, because they were kind of driving around and they were as available as Ubers. I mean, with my house, there's always an Uber within 5 minutes of my house.
Mm-hmm.
And if they were that available, it does change the economics of, does somebody even need to own a car? Does it even make sense to own a car?
It completely changes everything.
And you think about the United States, and you think about the automobile and the place that the automobile has in American culture, the place that it has in all of our lives, the place that our car has in our lives. And it's a culture changing move.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting, the infrastructure that needs to be put in, and it's not state infrastructure, but the infrastructure that will be created. And it's an interesting story that came out today that actually the U.S. government is mandating. If you go to this Forbes story, the U.S. government is mandating, I found this super interesting. Every new car built starting in 2020 will be required to be able to talk to the other cars that are on the road. So basically, here's the story. More than 2 years after the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration first issued an advance notice of proposed rulemaking to mandate vehicle-to-vehicle communication in the U.S., the agency is finally ready to move forward. Following an extended comment and testing period, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration today published the notice of proposed rulemaking for what is expected to become Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard 150. So if it makes it to this stage without significant changes, all manufacturers would be required to install dedicated short-range communication radios into new vehicles, probably starting about 2020. So the whole process from the publication of the NPRM to final rule usually takes about 1 year, explained Brian Thomas. 2 years after that phase-in period begins with half of new vehicles in the first year being affected, 75% in the second year, and 100% from the third year on. So this is one of the technologies that I had said that I find so interesting, which is mesh networks. The idea that if you have enough devices all communicating with each other and they have enough bandwidth, that you could have kind of your own mesh internet. So as you saw there in that, go back to the Forbes article, because they have a kind of a cool graphic that sort of shows it. So you see how those bubbles kind of overlap each other. So the idea is that instead of laying down fiber, that each one of those bubbles, as they sort of cross through each other, can pass packets to one another, packets of information. And then you combine those with our cell phones and whatnot, and pretty soon we're all just connected through this web, this mesh web. It's an interesting world that's coming upon us, Christian. We've got, 2020 is just around the corner.
It's around the corner. It's not far at all. And we discussed, you kind of showed me the technology with the mesh networks, and I was blown away.
It's crazy.
It's
if people
crazy.
go on YouTube and type in, cell phone mesh networks or whatnot, and some of the demos are amazing. Yeah.
Incredible stuff. And it's really interesting because you look at this, what happened with the internet, and that's a universal thing. It's a universal principle. And it's on a macro level.
It's on a huge level, yeah.
And now it's almost reversing and going back down into a micro level. but the same kind of technology, the same kind of information is being passed. So it's kind of going, like, it's pulsing almost. It's really interesting to watch it from that perspective. But
well, one thing that I think about constantly, I mean, I was on the internet very early, probably like about 95. I was heavily on it all day, and there was nothing on it at that time. But you take a business, it's so interesting that it's Uber. Because you take a business like Uber and you go back 10 years, right? I mean, never mind go back 20 years to before most people were even on the internet. Like, if you were to go back 20 years and then someone describes the business of Uber, never mind self-driving Uber, right? Just Uber as it stands right now. You couldn't even describe it.
it would seem like magic. It would seem
You
like
couldn't even, well, because you're talking about a phone, the device of the phone that's got access to GPS, right? That's on the internet with the wireless data, a touch screen, you know, all of these, and it's just like that.
Crazy.
And that was 20 years ago. You go back 10 years and it's still, people can't really wrap their head around it because it's an app.
Yeah.
10 years ago, what's an app? What the hell is a smartphone? So you can only imagine 10 years from now with this happening, what are the advances?
Yeah, it's
what
gnarly.
are the business opportunities? We can't even imagine them.
Yeah.
We can't even describe them.
They're unraveling every second. It's changing. I'm watching what's happening in the internet marketing world, and every day there's a new piece of technology coming out. Every day. It's
Every day.
crazy. And a lot of them are kind of related, but it's you know, they're launching stuff every day. New software, new developments, new this, new that, new theories, new concepts, new strategies, new all kinds of stuff. So the same thing applies with this, and it could be there's going to be a lot of pain when this comes in.
Change is always painful in some way, you know.
But we kind of discussed that a few weeks ago, and I think that pain is going to reveal something amazing, you know.
And I think that's a good place to end this show off. Thank you, Christian, very much for today.
Absolutely.
On this note, we are in a time of amazing technological change, of paradigm shifts. 20 years ago, we couldn't have imagined the internet. 10 years ago, we couldn't have imagined the smartphone. And now, cars are driving themselves, and we're able to hail them using both. And yet, today, 538 people are going to vote to place into a position of power a single individual. And the system by which those 538 people are voting, and the office, and the rules governing the office that person is going to be in for the next 4 years, is a system developed hundreds of years ago. A system developed by men who wrote it down with a quill pen on parchment paper, who traveled to their meetings by horseback. Government, whether you like it or not, the rules that govern a society are a technology. They're a technology. And this is a technology that is involved in every single phase of our lives. If you are someone who is upset that we have an electoral college, if you are someone who thinks that, oh, maybe things should be different in the way that the government is laid out, maybe it should be. Maybe it should be. Maybe the solution is not building on top of a foundation that is completely archaic, completely outdated, and to be honest, has the ability to be manipulated by sophisticated individuals. Maybe the solution is to drop that. Maybe the solution is to explore the technology and the means that we have. We have cars that can drive themselves. We can't set up some rules to protect you and your family and your property. The technology's here. The minds are here. As Christian said, every day there are new innovations in every single field. And yet there's one field, the field of the state, where the ideas that we're dealing with are at best hundreds of years old and at worst thousands of years old. The question is, are we going to move forward with technology in one aspect of our life, but leave it ruled over by an archaic and old system? Or are we brave enough? Are we brave enough to take that step? To take that step and to embrace the technology of freedom? New thought, new belief, new behavior. Something to decide for yourself, but the alternatives are out there. We're going to keep presenting them, and we will be back to present more of them next Monday, 10 a.m., and you can catch the archive of this show on YouTube at youtube.com/Vin Armani. Also, clips on the YouTube of Activist Post. So that's youtube.com/Activist Post. And again, we will be back next Monday with another show. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you then.